Paris, 1925. The Palais Garnier dazzles with the premiere of La Voix d'Ombre, but a scream shatters the night as soprano Céleste Laurent is found dead, poisoned in her private box. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of passion and deceit. Was it the brooding composer, haunted by a tragic past? The ambitious understudy, hungry for the spotlight? Or a scorned lover, betrayed by Celeste's charm? As secrets unravel and motives clash, Poirot's little grey cells uncover a truth as deadly as the cyanide itself. Step into the shadows of the opera house, where love kills and the final curtain reveals all. Chapter 1. The curtain rises. The Palais Garnier, its golden dome aglow beneath a velvet Parisian sky, stood as a monument to grandeur on that crisp October evening of 1925. The chandeliers within cast a warm, crystalline light across the crimson velvet seats, where the crème de la crème of society gathered for the premiere of La Voix d'Ombre, a daring new opera by the reclusive composer Etienne Duval. The air thrummed with expectation. The rustle of silk gowns and the murmur of cultured voices, blending with the faint tuning of the orchestra below. In a private box overlooking the stage, Hercule Poirot adjusted his perfectly tailored evening coat, his small, fastidious hands smoothing an imaginary crease. His green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, surveyed the glittering throng below with an air of detached curiosity. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the Englishman abroad, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His programme crumpled slightly in his hand. "I say, Poirot," Hastings ventured, his voice low to avoid disturbing the nearby dowagers fanning themselves with ostrich plumes. "This isn't quite your usual haunt. What's brought you to the opera? Not a sudden passion for arias, surely?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Mon cher Hastings, you mistake me. The opera, it is not merely music. It is a theatre of the soul. Here, one observes the human heart in all its complexity. Love, ambition, envy. And where such emotions flourish, there is often, how do you say, mischief." Hastings chuckled. "Mischief? You're expecting a crime in the middle of a highbrow affair like this?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Expect, non. Anticipate, perhaps. The Opera House. It is a stage for drama both on and off the boards, and I, Hercule Poirot, am never far from drama." Before Hastings could reply, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the auditorium. The conductor, a wiry figure with a shock of silver hair, raised his baton, and the orchestra surged into the haunting overture of La Voix d'Ombre. The notes, at once mournful and electrifying, seemed to weave a spell over the audience. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his attention fixed not on the stage, but on the private boxes across the way, where silhouettes moved like players in a shadow play. The curtain rose, revealing a Gothic a tableau of moonlit ruins. Madame Céleste Laurent, the celebrated soprano and star of the production, glided onto the stage as the tragic heroine, her voice soaring with a purity that sent shivers through the crowd. Her emerald necklace, a gift from an anonymous admirer, caught the stage lights, sparkling like a constellation against her alabaster throat. "She's magnificent," Hastings whispered, momentarily forgetting his skepticism about opera. "Oui," Poirot murmured, but his gaze had shifted to box 5, where a figure sat alone, half hidden by the velvet drapes. Something in the posture, a certain rigidity, caught his notice. He frowned, his little grey cells stirring. The first act reached its climax, Celeste's voice climbing to an ethereal crescendo. Then, as the final note lingered, a scream tore through the auditorium, not from the stage, but from box 5. The orchestra faltered, the conductor's baton froze, and a collective gasp rose from the audience. A spotlight, operated by some quick-witted stagehand, swung upward, illuminating the box. There, slumped in her seat, was Madame Céleste Laurent herself, not on the stage, where a stunned understudy now stood frozen, but in the private box. her head lolled to one side, her emerald necklace glinting cruelly against her lifeless form. The scent of bitter almonds, faint but unmistakable, wafted downward, and Poirot's expression hardened. "Cyanide," he said softly, rising to his feet with the agility of a much younger man. "Hastings, vite! We must act!" The auditorium erupted into chaos. Cries of shock, the rustle of programs dropping to the floor, and the hurried footsteps of ushers. Poirot, undeterred, made his way to the grand staircase, his mind already dissecting the scene. "She was on stage moments ago," he muttered. "How then does she appear in the box dead? And why?" Hastings, struggling to keep pace, panted, "But Poirot, how could she be poisoned in front of hundreds of people? It's impossible." "Impossible?" Poirot's voice was sharp. "Non, mon ami. It is improbable, perhaps, but never impossible. The method, it is clever. The motive, it is hidden, but Hercule Poirot, he will uncover both." As they reached the corridor leading to Box 5, a harried usher barred their way. "Monsieur, the police have been called. No one may enter." Poirot drew himself up, his small stature radiating authority. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is a matter of murder. You will permit me to pass." The usher, cowed by Poirot's unwavering gaze, stepped aside. Inside the box, the scene was stark. Celeste's body, still elegant in death, her eyes wide with a final, unspoken terror. Poirot knelt beside her, his gloved fingers hovering over the necklace, then moving to her lips, where a faint trace of froth confirmed his suspicion. "Cyanide, as I thought," he said, "administered swiftly, perhaps in a drink or a breath, but how and by whom?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, pointed to a crystal goblet on the floor, its contents spilled across the plush carpet. Could that be it? Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, Hastings, but we must not assume. The goblet, it may be a distraction. The truth, it lies elsewhere." As the distant wail of police sirens echoed through the Parisian night, Poirot stood, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The curtain had risen on a mystery, and he, Hercule Poirot, would ensure it played to its final, revealing note. Chapter 2. The Cast of Suspects. The morning after the tragedy at the Palais Garnier dawned grey and heavy, as if Paris itself mourned the loss of its brightest soprano. The opera house, so resplendent under the previous night's chandeliers, now stood sombre, its gilded halls echoing with the footsteps of police officers and the hushed whispers of scandal. The grand foyer, with its marble columns and frescoed ceilings, had become a makeshift headquarters for the investigation, and it was here that Hercule Poirot found himself, his polished shoes clicking purposefully on the polished floor. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, trailed behind, his face a mixture of fascination and unease. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, adjusting his tie, "this place feels like a tomb today. Hard to believe it was all glamour and music just hours ago." Poirot, his eyes scanning the ornate surroundings with a precision that missed nothing, replied softly, "Oui, mon ami, but death, it has a way of stripping away the glitter. What remains is truth, or the shadow of it. And it is that shadow we must now pursue." Inspector Claude Beaumont, a broad-shouldered man with a moustache that rivaled Poirot's in volume, if not in elegance, approached them with a brisk nod. His face was lined with the strain of a sleepless night, and his voice carried the gravel of too many cigarettes. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I'll admit, I'm out of my depth here. A murder in the middle of an opera performance? It's unheard of. The prefect is breathing down my neck, and the newspapers are already howling about a cursed premiere. I'd be grateful for your insight." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture both courteous and commanding. "I'm at your service, Inspector. But first, we must establish the facts. Madame Celeste Laurent was poisoned with cyanide, n'est-ce pas? And the method, it appears to involve the goblet found in her box. Yet, I suspect there is more to this than meets the eye. Tell me, who are the players in this tragic drama? Beaumont gestured toward a cluster of individuals seated in the foyer, their faces a gallery of grief, suspicion, and barely concealed agitation. These are the key figures, as far as we know. I've had my men question the staff, but these 5 were closest to Celeste. Professionally or otherwise, Poirot's gaze swept over the group, his little grey cells, already at work. Bon, let us meet them one by one and see what secrets they guard. The first to be summoned was Etienne Duval, the composer of La Voix d'Ombre. He was a man in his late 30s, lean and intense, with dark hair that fell in disarray over his forehead and eyes that burned with a restless energy. His black suit was rumpled, as if he had not changed since the performance, and his fingers twitched as though longing for a piano. He stood before Poirot with a mixture of defiance and unease, his jaw set. "Monsieur Duval," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. "Your opera. It was the triumph of the season until tragedy intervened. Tell me, what was your relationship with Madame Laurent?" Duval's lips curled into romantic suspense, a sneer, quickly masked. "Relationship? There was none, Monsieur Poirot, beyond the professional. Celeste was the voice of my opera, nothing more. She was brilliant, yes, but impossible. She insisted on altering my score, claiming it was too avant-garde for her precious audience. We argued, I won't deny it, but murder? Absurd." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the flicker of something unspoken in Duval's gaze. "And yet, monsieur, you were seen backstage before the performance, near her dressing room. An unusual place for a composer, non?" Duval stiffened. "I was ensuring the props were correct. The goblet in Act 2. It was symbolic, part of my vision. I wanted no mistakes." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, his tone deceptively mild. "And did you handle this goblet yourself?" "I may have inspected it," Duval admitted, his voice faltering. "But it was filled with water, nothing more, I swear it." Poirot made a mental note, his moustache twitching. "Merci, Monsieur Duval. We will speak again." Next came Marguerite Dubois, the understudy, a young woman of striking beauty, whose delicate features belied a steely ambition. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her green eyes met Poirot's with a calculated warmth. She wore a simple black dress, a nod to mourning, but the way she carried herself suggested a woman who saw opportunity in tragedy. "Mademoiselle Dubois," Poirot said, offering a small bow. "You are now the star of La Voix d'Ombre, are you not? A tragic circumstance, but a fortunate one for you, perhaps?" Marguerite's smile was tight, her hands clasped demurely in her lap. "I loved Celeste, Monsieur Poirot. She was my mentor, my inspiration. I never dreamed of taking her place, not like this." "And yet," Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but probing, "there are whispers that you envied her, that you felt she overshadowed you, kept you in the wings when you deserved the spotlight." Marguerite's cheeks flushed, but her composure held. "Whispers are cruel, monsieur. Yes, I wanted my chance to shine, who wouldn't? But I would never harm her. I was on stage when she died, playing a minor role. The entire audience saw me." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes glinting. "But the poison, it was administered before the performance, I suspect. Tell me, did you ever visit her dressing room that evening?" Marguerite hesitated, a fraction too long, only to wish her luck. "I brought her a bouquet of roses, as I always did before a show." "Roses," Poirot repeated, his mind filing away the detail. "And nothing else? No drink, no gift that might have been tampered with?" Her eyes widened, but she shook her head vehemently. "Nothing, monsieur. I swear it." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, turning to Hastings as she retreated. "She is ambitious, Hastings, and ambition, it can be a dangerous thing. But is it dangerous enough to kill? Hastings frowned. She's got motive, Poirot. And she was backstage. Could she have slipped something into that goblet? Perhaps, Poirot said, but we must not leap to conclusions. The goblet! It is too obvious. Let us meet the next player. Lord Reginald Ashford, an English aristocrat and patron of the opera, approached with the stiff dignity of a man accustomed to command. His silver hair and tailored evening suit spoke of wealth, but his eyes betrayed a weariness that no amount of polish could conceal. Beside him stood his wife, Lady Evelyn Ashford, a statuesque woman with a face like carved marble. Her blonde hair swept into a severe bun. "Monsieur Poirot," Lord Ashford began, his voice clipped, "this is a ghastly business. Celeste was a dear friend, a true artist. I can't imagine who would do this." Poirot's gaze flickered between the couple, noting the tension in Lady Evelyn's posture. "A friend, you say, monsieur? Or perhaps more? There are rumours, you understand, of a closer connection between you and Madame Laurent." Lord Ashford's face reddened, but before he could respond, Lady Evelyn spoke, her voice cold as winter. "My husband's friendships are his own affair, Monsieur Poirot. I concern myself with more practical matters, like ensuring this opera house continues to thrive despite this scandal." Poirot tilted his head, intrigued by her composure. "And you, madame, were you also a friend of Madame Laurent?" Lady Evelyn's lips thinned. "I admired her talent, nothing more. I was in the audience all evening, as my husband can attest." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "And you saw nothing unusual? No one approaching box 5? "Nothing," she replied, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "I was watching the stage, not the boxes." Poirot thanked them and turned to Hastings. "The lady, she is too controlled, no? And the lord, he hides something. Love, it is a powerful motive, but so is betrayal." The next suspect, Pierre Moreau, the opera house manager, was a nervous man in his 50s, his bald head gleaming with perspiration despite the cool morning air. His hands twisted together as he spoke, his eyes darting between Poirot and the inspector. "Monsieur Poirot, this is a disaster. The opera house will never recover from such a scandal. Celeste was our star, our soul. I can't believe she's gone." Poirot regarded him with a piercing stare. "You were responsible for the smooth running of the performance, Monsieur Moreau. Did you oversee the props, the stage, the dressing rooms?" Moreau nodded eagerly. Of course. I checked everything myself. The goblet was clean, filled with water by a trusted stagehand. I swear it. And yet, Poirot said, the goblet contained cyanide. Tell me, did you see anyone near Madame Laurent's dressing room before the performance? Moreau hesitated, his fingers twitching. I saw many people. It's chaos backstage before a premiere. But no one suspicious, no. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Merci, monsieur. Your diligence is noted. Finally, Dr. Julian Voss, Celeste's physician, was called forward. He was a thin, bespectacled man with a scholarly air, his grey suit immaculate, but his hands betraying a slight tremor. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice steady but low, I treated Celeste for nerves. She was under great pressure, you understand. The premiere, the expectations, it was too much. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you prescribed her a tonic, I presume? Yes, Voss admitted. A mild sedative, perfectly safe. I gave it to her myself yesterday morning. And where is this tonic now? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively casual. Voss blinked. In her dressing room, I suppose. She kept it there. Poirot nodded, dismissing the doctor but making a mental note to inspect the dressing room immediately. Hastings, he said as they stepped away, this tonic interests me greatly. If it was tampered with, it could be the key to our puzzle. Inspector Beaumont, who had been listening intently, interjected. We've searched the dressing room, Monsieur Poirot, The goblet was the only thing out of place. But I'll have my men look again for this tonic. Bon, Poirot said, and we must also examine the box itself. The cyanide, it is swift, but it requires precision. We must discover how it reached Madame Laurent's lips. The trio made their way to box 5, now cordoned off by a stern-faced gendarme. The air within was heavy with the lingering scent of bitter almonds, and Poirot's keen nose wrinkled as he surveyed the scene. The goblet lay where it had fallen, its crystal surface catching the dim light. Beside it, a velvet cushion bore the imprint of Celeste's body, and a programme lay discarded on the floor, its pages crumpled. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the goblet without touching it. "Inspector, has this been analysed?" Beaumont nodded. "My men are testing it now. Preliminary results confirm cyanide, but we're still determining how much and how it was introduced." Poirot's eyes roamed the box, noting the angle of the seat, the view of the stage, the proximity to the corridor. "She was alone here, you say?" "Yes," Beaumont confirmed. "The usher confirmed no one entered the box during the performance. She must have been poisoned before she took her seat. And yet," Poirot mused, "she was on stage for the first act. How, then, did she reach the box so quickly and in such a state? The timing? It is critical." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, pointed to a small table in the corner. "Look, Poirot, there's a glass of water, half drunk. Could that be it?" Poirot examined the glass, noting a faint residue on its rim. "Perhaps Hastings, but I suspect a red herring. The goblet? It is too convenient. The poison, I believe, was administered earlier, perhaps in her dressing room." They descended to the backstage area, where Celeste's dressing room awaited, its door guarded by another gendarme. The room was a shrine to the soprano's vanity. Mirrors framed in gold, a wardrobe bursting with silks and furs, and a vanity table cluttered with powders, perfumes, and a small dark bottle, labelled tonic. Poirot seized upon it, his gloved fingers lifting it to the light. "This," he said, "must be sent to your laboratory, Inspector. If it contains cyanide, we have our method." Beaumont nodded, signalling an officer to take the bottle. "And if it does?" "Then," Poirot said, his voice low, "we have a murderer who is both cunning and bold. Someone who knew Madame Laurent's habits, her trust in her physician, her reliance on this tonic." As they left the dressing room, Poirot paused, his eyes catching a small detail. A single red rose, its petals wilting, tucked behind a mirror. "Curious," he murmured. "Mademoiselle Dubois mentioned roses, did she not?" Hastings nodded. "She said she brought Celeste a bouquet. Do you think it means something?" "Everything means something, Hastings," Poirot replied. "The rose, it is a symbol of love, of regret, or perhaps of betrayal. We shall see." Back in the foyer, the suspects remained, their faces a study in tension. Poirot addressed them collectively, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed, and the truth, it will not remain hidden. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. But I warn you, secrets, they have a way of betraying their keepers." As the group dispersed, their eyes avoiding one another, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The cast is set, mon ami, and the stage is ready. But the motive, it eludes us. Love, ambition, revenge. Each suspect has a reason, but only one has the heart of a killer." Hastings shivered, despite the warmth of the foyer. "This is going to be a devil of a case, Poirot." "Oui," Poirot agreed, his moustache curving into a faint smile. "But Hercule Poirot, he is equal to the challenge." Chapter 3. The Poisoned Chalice. The Palais Garnier, its opulent corridors now dimmed by the shadow of murder, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot navigated the labyrinthine backstage passages. The morning's grey light filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors, where stagehands moved with hushed urgency, their usual banter silenced by the tragedy. Captain Arthur Hastings, trailing Poirot, clutched his notebook, his brow furrowed with the effort to keep pace with his friend's relentless deductions. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, dodging a coil of rope left carelessly by a stagehand. "This whole affair is positively bewildering. Celeste was on stage, then in the box dead, all in a matter of minutes. How could anyone have managed it?" Poirot, his small frame moving with surprising agility, paused to adjust his Homburg hat, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon cher Hastings, the impossible. It is only a matter of perspective. The poison cyanide, swift and merciless, requires but a moment to act. The question is not how she died, but how the poison was delivered. And that, I believe, brings us to the heart of the mystery." They reached Celeste Laurent's dressing room, a sanctum of elegance now cordoned off by a dour-faced gendarme. Inspector Claude Beaumont, his heavy brows knit with frustration, awaited them inside, standing beside a cluttered vanity table. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine perfume, undercut by a faint acrid note that Poirot recognized at once. "Cyanide again," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching as he surveyed the room. "It lingers, like a ghost of the crime." Beaumont gestured toward a crystal goblet, its delicate stem glinting under the electric lights. It sat on the vanity, a prop from Act 2 of La Voix d'Ombre, where Celeste's character, the doomed heroine, was to drink a ceremonial toast. The goblet's rim bore a faint cloudy residue, and a few drops of liquid remained at its base. "This," Beaumont said, his voice rough with fatigue, "is what killed her, I'd wager. My men found it in the box, but it was brought here after the performance for cleaning. We've sent it for analysis, but I'm certain it's the source." Poirot knelt beside the vanity, his gloved fingers hovering over the goblet without touching it. He inhaled deeply, his nose wrinkling at the telltale bitter almond scent. "Oui, Inspector, the goblet is significant, but I wonder, is it the whole story?" He rose, his eyes scanning the room with meticulous care. "Tell me, who had access to this goblet before the performance?" Beaumont consulted his notebook. "The stage manager, Pierre Moreau, oversaw the props. He claims it was filled with water by a stagehand, Jacques Lefebvre, just before the curtain rose. Lefebvre swears he used a fresh carafe from the prop room. And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but incisive, "the goblet contains cyanide. Water does not transform into poison without a human hand. We must speak with this Lefebvre." Hastings, scribbling notes, looked up. "But Poirot, if the goblet was poisoned, how did it get from the stage to the box? Celeste was performing. Everyone saw her. She couldn't have carried it herself." "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. "The timing, it is the key. Madame Laurent was on stage for the first act, yet she died in box 5, moments after her aria. The goblet? It was a prop used in the performance. How then did it reach her lips in the box?" Beaumont scratched his chin. "Could someone have slipped into the box during the performance? The usher said it was empty until Celeste appeared there. But it's possible, but unlikely," Poirot interrupted, his tone firm. "The box was visible to half the audience. A stranger entering would have been noticed. No, the poison was administered before she reached the box, or the goblet was placed there deliberately. We must reconstruct her movements." Poirot's gaze fell on the vanity, where a clutter of items told the story of Celeste's final hours. A silver hairbrush, a pot of rouge, a half-burned candle, and a small dark bottle labelled tonic. He paused, his fingers hovering over the bottle, then turned to Beaumont. "This tonic, it was prescribed by Dr. Voss, oui?" Beaumont nodded, He mentioned it during questioning. Said it was for her nerves, perfectly harmless. We've sent it to the laboratory as you suggested." "Bon," Poirot said, his mind racing. "But let us consider. The goblet is a prop, handled by many. The tonic, it is personal, used only by Madame Laurent. If the poison was in the tonic, it would explain much. Her collapse in the box, the speed of her death." Hastings frowned. "But Poirot, she drank from the goblet on stage, didn't she? I saw it myself. Part of the scene." "Oui, mon ami. But did she truly drink?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The theatre, it is a place of illusion. Perhaps she only pretended to sip, as actors often do. Or perhaps the goblet was clean during the performance, and the poison came later." Beaumont's face darkened. "You're saying someone could have tampered with it after the act?" "Exactly," Poirot said. "Or before, in this very room. Let us examine further." He moved to a wardrobe, its doors ajar, revealing a cascade of costumes, silks, velvets, and feathers that spoke of Celeste's stardom. Among them, Poirot noticed a small folded piece of paper tucked into a satin slipper. He retrieved it with care, unfolding it to reveal a message written in a hurried, angular hand. "The truth will sing louder than your voice." Poirot's lips pursed. "Most curious. A threat, perhaps, or a warning. But from whom?" Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Good Lord, Poirot, that's chilling. Sounds like someone had it in for her." "Indeed," Poirot said, slipping the note into his pocket. "This suggests a motive deeper than professional rivalry. Hatred, perhaps, or a secret Madame Laurent wished to keep hidden." Beaumont, growing impatient, gestured toward the door. "I've got Jacques Lefebvre waiting in the prop room. Shall we question him?" "Oui, Inspector," Poirot said. "But first, I wish to see the stage." The stage of the Palais Garnier was a vast, shadowed expanse, its painted backdrop of moonlit ruins still in place from the previous night's performance. The air smelled of dust and grease paint, and the faint creak of rigging overhead added to the eerie atmosphere. Poirot stood at the centre, where Celeste had delivered her aria, and closed his eyes, visualizing the scene. "She stood here," he murmured, "the cynosure of all eyes. The goblet was brought to her by a chorus member, as part of the scene. She raised it, she sang, she collapsed." "No," Hastings corrected. "She finished the aria. I saw her leave the stage, bowing to applause. It was only after, in the box, that she died." Poirot nodded slowly. "Then the poison was not in the goblet during the performance. It was introduced later, or she was poisoned by another means, and the goblet is a distraction." They proceeded to the prop room, a cluttered space filled with swords, candelabras, and velvet cloaks. Jacques Lefebvre, a wiry young man with nervous eyes, stood twisting his cap in his hands. "I didn't do nothing, monsieur," he blurted as Poirot approached. "I filled the goblet with water, like always, from the carafe in the prop room, I swear." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And who else was in this room before the performance, Monsieur Lefebvre?" Lefebvre swallowed. "Monsieur Moreau checking the props. Mademoiselle Dubois, she came to fetch a shawl. And Monsieur Duval. He was fussing about the goblet, said it had to be perfect." "Duval again," Poirot murmured. "And where is this carafe now?" Lefebvre pointed to a chipped porcelain carafe on a shelf. Poirot examined it, noting its clean interior. "No trace of cyanide here," he said, "but tell me, did you see Madame Laurent with the goblet after the act?" Lefebvre shook his head. "No, monsieur. She left it on stage as usual. I was going to collect it when the scream came from the box." Poirot thanked him and turned to Beaumont. "The goblet was moved to the box, Inspector. Someone placed it there, perhaps to mislead us. But the tonic, its role grows more intriguing." As they returned to the foyer, a young officer approached, his face pale. "Inspector, the laboratory results are in. The goblet contained cyanide, enough to kill in seconds. But the tonic, it's clean, no trace of poison." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Most interesting. The goblet, then, is our murder weapon. But how did it reach box 5, and why?" Hastings, ever practical, suggested, "Could someone have switched goblets? A clean one on stage, a poisoned one in the box." "Possible," Poirot said, "but it requires precision and opportunity. We must learn who had access to box 5, and who knew Madame Laurent would retire there after her aria." Beaumont sighed. "The usher swears no one entered the box until Celeste appeared. It's a locked room mystery, Poirot." "Not locked, Inspector," Poirot corrected, his voice soft but firm. "Merely concealed. The truth, it is like a melody, hidden in the notes, waiting to be heard." As they left the stage, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The goblet, the tonic, the cryptic note, the rose, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. "Hastings," he said, "we are dealing with a mind both bold and subtle. The murderer, they have played their part well. But Hercule Poirot, he does not applaud until the curtain falls." Chapter 4. The Composer's Secret. The narrow streets of Montmartre, bathed in the pallid light of a late morning sun, buzzed with the usual clamour of artists, poets, and street vendors. But Hercule Poirot moved through them with a singular purpose. His polished shoes clicked against the cobblestones as he and Captain Arthur Hastings approached the modest apartment of Etienne Duval, the composer of La Voix d'Ombre. The building, a weathered structure tucked between a café and a painter's atelier, seemed an unlikely home for a man whose music had captivated Paris. Yet it spoke of Duval's reclusive nature, a man who preferred shadows to spotlight. Hastings, pulling his overcoat tighter against the autumn chill, glanced at Poirot. "I say, Poirot, why Duval's place? He's a bit of a hothead, but a murderer? Seems a stretch." Poirot's green eyes glinted beneath the brim of his Homburg hat. "Mon cher Hastings, the temperament of an artist, it is like a storm, passionate, unpredictable. Monsieur Duval quarrelled with Madame Laurent over his opera, oui, but there is something more. A secret, perhaps, that lies beneath his anger. We shall uncover it." They ascended a creaking staircase to Duval's apartment, where the door stood slightly ajar, releasing a faint strain of piano music, a mournful melody that stopped abruptly as Poirot knocked. Duval appeared, his dark hair dishevelled, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His eyes, red-rimmed and shadowed, betrayed a sleepless night, and a half-empty bottle of red wine on a nearby table suggested he had sought solace in drink. "Monsieur Poirot," Duval said, his voice rough with irritation. "I expected the police, not a private detective. What do you want?" Poirot offered a courteous bow, undeterred by the composer's brusqueness. "Monsieur Duval, I seek only the truth. May we enter? It is a matter of some urgency." Duval hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing them into a cluttered room that seemed to breathe creativity and chaos in equal measure. Sheet music littered every surface. Some pages crumpled, others scrawled with furious corrections. A grand piano dominated one corner, its keys worn from use, while a stack of unopened letters teetered on a desk. The air carried the faint scent of ink and stale wine, and a single window offered a view of Montmartre's rooftops, shrouded in mist. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on a framed photograph on the desk. A young woman with striking features, her dark hair cascading over a lace collar, her smile radiant yet tinged with melancholy. The resemblance to Celeste Laurent was uncanny, though the photograph was dated 1915, 10 years prior. "Who is this, Monsieur Duval?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing, as he lifted the frame with gloved fingers. Duval's face tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "My sister Claire," he said curtly. "She died a long time ago." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the tremor in Duval's voice. "She bears a remarkable likeness to Madame Laurent. Did they know each other?" Duval turned away, pacing to the window. "They were friends once, at the conservatory." But that was before—" He trailed off, his jaw working as if wrestling with words he could not speak. "Before what, monsieur?" Poirot pressed, his tone soft but insistent. "You will forgive my curiosity, but in a murder investigation, no detail is too small." Duval spun to face him, his eyes blazing. "Before Claire's death. She was a singer, like Celeste, but her voice, it was purer, truer. She could have been a star, but she fell ill. Consumption, they said. Celeste was with her at the end, but she did nothing to help. She abandoned Claire, stole her roles, her future." His voice broke, and he sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. Hastings, standing by the door, shifted uncomfortably. "That's a motive, Poirot," he whispered. If Duval blamed Celeste for his sister's fate— Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Monsieur Duval, you believe Madame Laurent betrayed your sister. Did this betrayal fuel your arguments over La Voix d'Ombre?" Duval's laugh was bitter. "Everything fueled our arguments. Celeste treated my work like a canvas for her ego. She demanded changes, said the score was too modern, too difficult. But murder? I'm no killer, Monsieur Poirot. I pour my rage into my music, not poison." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "And yet you were seen near the goblet, monsieur. You inspected it, did you not?" "I told you. I wanted it perfect," Duval snapped. "It was a symbol in my opera, a chalice of fate. I checked it for cracks, nothing more. I didn't touch the water." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this photograph, why keep it here, where you see it daily? A reminder of your loss." Duval's gaze softened, his fingers brushing the frame. "To honor Claire, to remember what was taken from her." Poirot set the photograph down gently. "Merci, Monsieur Duval. You have been most illuminating." As they left the apartment, Hastings shook his head. "He's hiding something, Poirot. That story about his sister, it's too convenient, and he's got the temper for it." "Perhaps," Poirot said, descending the stairs with measured steps. "But grief, it is a powerful force, Hastings. It can drive a man to create or to destroy. We must learn more about this Claire and her connection to Celeste." Their next stop was a small café near the Opera House, where Poirot had arranged to meet a chorus member, Mademoiselle Sophie Renaud, who had hinted at gossip during Inspector Beaumont's initial inquiries. The café, with its checkered tablecloths and aroma of fresh coffee, was a haven of normalcy amidst the storm of the investigation. Sophie, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a nervous smile, sat waiting, her hands twisting a napkin. "Mademoiselle Renaud," Poirot began, his voice warm as he took a seat. "You knew Madame Laurent well, oui? What can you tell me of her enemies?" Sophie glanced around, as if fearing eavesdroppers, then leaned forward. "Celeste was adored, Monsieur Poirot, but not by everyone. She had a way of making people feel small. She was kind to me, but to others, especially those who challenged her, she could be cruel." "Cruel how?" Poirot asked, sipping a tiny cup of espresso. "She mocked Marguerite Dubois, called her a second-rate sparrow in front of the cast," Sophie said, "and Monsieur Duval, she humiliated him, saying his music was unsingable. Then there were the letters." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Letters?" Sophie nodded. "Anonymous ones delivered to her dressing room for weeks. I saw one once. She showed it to me, laughing. It said something about her past catching up with her. She called it nonsense, but I think it frightened her." "Did you keep any of these letters?" Poirot asked, his voice urgent. Sophie shook her head. "She burned them. But there was one phrase I remember. 'Your voice will be silenced.' It gave me chills." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. "That sounds like the note we found, Poirot. Could it be from the same person?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his mind racing. "Mademoiselle, did anyone else know of these letters?" "Only Pierre Moreau, I think," Sophie said. "He was always fussing over Celeste, like a mother hen. He might have seen them." Poirot thanked her. his expression thoughtful as they left the café. "The letters, Hastings, they point to a vendetta. Someone wished to punish Celeste, not just for her arrogance, but for something in her past. And this Claire Duval, she is the key." Back at the Palais Garnier, Poirot requested Inspector Beaumont's files on Celeste's career. In a quiet corner of the foyer, he pored over newspaper clippings and conservatory records, his finger tracing a line in an old program from 1914. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a cast list. "Celeste Laurent and Claire Duval, both sopranos at the Conservatoire de Paris. They performed together in Carmen, but after 1915, Claire's name vanishes." Hastings frowned. "You think Celeste had something to do with her death?" "Not directly, perhaps," Poirot said, "but Duval believes she did. And belief, it can be as deadly as truth." As evening fell, Poirot returned to Celeste's dressing room, determined to uncover more clues. Among her belongings, he found a locked diary, its leather cover worn from use. With Beaumont's permission, he picked the lock, a skill Hastings always found mildly shocking, and skimmed its pages. The entries were cryptic, filled with references to sea and guilt that haunts me. One passage stood out. "Sea's shadow follows me. I hear her in every note. If E knows, he will never forgive me." "A for Etienne," Poirot murmured, "and C for Claire." Celeste carried a burden, Hastings. Perhaps she betrayed her friend, or perhaps she only felt she did. Either way, it cost her life. Hastings shivered. "This is getting darker by the minute, Poirot. If Duval wrote those letters, and if he poisoned the goblet—" "We must not assume," Poirot cautioned. "The goblet, it is too obvious. The truth, it lies in the shadows, like the title of Duval's opera. We must seek it there." As they left the opera house, the Parisian night enveloped them, its stars obscured by clouds. Poirot's mind churned with the threads of the case. A grieving composer, a threatening note, a past betrayal. "The secret of Claire Duval," he said softly. "It is the heart of this mystery. And I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it before the final act." Chapter 5. The Understudy's Ambition. The Palais Garnier, its golden arches and velvet draperies now muted by the sombre weight of murder, seemed to whisper secrets. As Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings made their way to the rehearsal hall, the morning light, filtering through tall windows, cast a pale glow on the polished wooden floor where the cast of La Voix d'Ombre gathered, their voices subdued. The tragedy of Celeste Laurent's death had not halted the opera's preparations. Indeed, the show was to go on, with Marguerite Dubois stepping into the starring role. Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, observed the scene with eyes that missed nothing, his moustache twitching as he noted the understudy's newfound prominence. Hastings, ever the practical companion, adjusted his hat and muttered, "I say, Poirot, it's a bit grim, isn't it? Marguerite taking Celeste's place so soon after, well, it's almost as if she expected it." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "Précisément, mon ami. Ambition. It is a flame that burns brightly, but it can also consume. Mademoiselle Dubois stands to gain much from this tragedy, and we must determine if her ambition led her to act." They approached the rehearsal hall, where Marguerite stood center stage, her auburn hair catching the light as she practiced a soaring aria. Her voice, while not as luminous as Celeste's, carried a fierce determination, and the chorus members watched her with a mix of admiration and unease. She wore a simple rehearsal dress of grey silk, but her posture suggested a woman already claiming the spotlight. As the music paused, she noticed Poirot and Hastings, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she descended the stage steps with practiced grace. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice warm but measured, "and Captain Hastings. I suppose you're here to ask more questions. I'm at your service, though I'm afraid I have little to add." Poirot offered a courteous bow, his gaze never leaving her face. "Mademoiselle Dubois, you are most gracious. Your performance today, it is impressive. You have stepped into Madame Laurent's role with remarkable ease. Tell me, how does it feel to take the stage as the star?" Marguerite's green eyes flickered, but her smile remained. "It's bittersweet, monsieur. Celeste was my mentor, my inspiration. I never wished for this opportunity at such a cost, but the opera must continue, and I will honor her by giving my best." "Admirable," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet, there are those who say you envied Madame Laurent, that you chafed in her shadow, waiting for your moment to shine." Marguerite's cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze steadily. "Gossip is cruel, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I wanted my chance. Who wouldn't? Celeste was a legend, but she could be difficult. She treated me like a child, dismissed my talent, but I would never harm her. I was on stage when she died, as you know." "Oui," Poirot said. "You were indeed visible to the audience, playing a minor role. But the poison, mademoiselle, it was likely administered before the performance. In her dressing room, perhaps? You visited her there, did you not, to offer your bouquet of roses?" Marguerite's hands tightened briefly on her rehearsal script. "Yes, I brought her roses, as I always did before a premiere. It was a gesture of respect. I saw her for only a moment. She was preparing, distracted. I left the flowers and wished her luck." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight tremor in her voice. "And while you were there, you saw nothing unusual? No one else in the room? No items out of place?" "Nothing," Marguerite said, her voice firm. "Just Celeste, her mirror, her costumes. She was drinking her tonic, as usual, but that's all." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The tonic, oui, prescribed by Dr. Voss. And yet the laboratory found no poison in it. Curious, no? Tell me, mademoiselle, did you handle the goblet that evening?" Marguerite's composure wavered, her fingers brushing a lock of hair from her face. "The goblet? No, I didn't touch it. I know it was a prop for Act 2, but I had no part in that scene. The stagehands managed it. Jacques Lefebvre, I think." Poirot nodded, filing away her response. "And your roses? Where did you place them?" "On her vanity," Marguerite said, her tone growing defensive. "Why does it matter? They were just flowers." "Everything matters, mademoiselle," Poirot said softly. "A single petal can hide a multitude of sins." As Marguerite returned to the stage, Hastings whispered, "She's nervous, Poirot. Did you see her hands? She's hiding something." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his gaze lingering on Marguerite's retreating figure. "But nervousness is not guilt. We must look closer." They made their way back to Celeste's dressing room, now a familiar haunt in their investigation. The room, with its gilded mirrors and scattered cosmetics, seemed frozen in time, a shrine to the fallen soprano. Poirot's attention was drawn to the vanity, where a vase of wilting red roses stood, their petals curling at the edges. He leaned closer, his nose wrinkling at a faint metallic scent that seemed out of place among the floral fragrance. "Hastings," he said, "do you smell that? It is not jasmine, nor rose." Hastings sniffed cautiously. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's like metal or chemicals. Could it be the cyanide?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not cyanide, mon ami, but something close. Perhaps a substance used to mask it." He examined the vase, noting a small vial tucked behind it, half hidden by a powder puff. The vial, labelled eau de parfum, was nearly empty, its contents giving off the same metallic tang. "Inspector Beaumont must analyze this," Poirot said, slipping the vial into a handkerchief. "If it contains a chemical that could disguise cyanide, it may point to our murderer's method." Hastings frowned. "But Marguerite said she only brought roses. Could she have left this vial?" "It is possible," Poirot said, "but we must not assume. Many had access to this room. Moreau, Duval, even Dr. Voss. The vial could belong to any of them, or none. Their next stop was the prop room, where Jacques Lefebvre, the stagehand, was sorting costumes with a distracted air. His cap was pulled low over his eyes, and he started when Poirot addressed him. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot began, his voice smooth. "You handled the goblet for Act 2, oui? Tell me, did Mademoiselle Dubois ever approach it?" Lefebvre shook his head vigorously. "No, monsieur. She was busy with her own costume changes. I filled the goblet myself with water from the carafe. Monsieur Moreau checked it, and Monsieur Duval fussed over its placement. That's all." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And after the act, when Madame Laurent left the stage, what became of the goblet?" "I left it on the stage table," Lefebvre said. "I was going to clean it when the scream came from the box. By the time I got back, it was gone." "Gone," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "And yet it appeared in box 5, with cyanide. Most curious." As they left the prop room, Hastings said, "Poirot, Marguerite was backstage. She had the chance to tamper with the goblet or the tonic. And that vial, it's suspicious, isn't it?" "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, "but suspicion is not proof. The vial, the roses, the goblet, they are threads in a tapestry, but the pattern remains unclear. We must learn more about Mademoiselle Dubois' movements." They sought out Sophie Renaud, the chorus member, who was lingering near the rehearsal hall, her sharp eyes watching Marguerite's performance. "Mademoiselle Renaud," Poirot said, "you saw Mademoiselle Dubois bring roses to Madame Laurent. Did you notice anything else she carried? A vial, perhaps, or a bottle?" Sophie frowned, thinking, "I didn't see anything like that, monsieur. She had the roses, wrapped in tissue paper. But she was in and out of the dressing room quickly. Celeste was in a mood. She snapped at Marguerite to leave her alone." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A mood? Was this typical?" "Not really," Sophie said. "Celeste was usually charming before a show, but that night she seemed afraid, kept looking at the door, like she expected someone." Poirot thanked her and turned to Hastings. "Fear, Hastings! Madame Laurent knew she was in danger. The letters, the note, her past, they were closing in." As they walked through the Opera House's grand foyer, Poirot paused by a poster of Marguerite Dubois, newly printed to announce her as the new star. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes held a glint of triumph. "Ambition," Poirot murmured. "It is a powerful motive. But is it enough to kill? Or is there another hand at work, guiding hers?" Hastings shivered. "This place is full of shadows, Poirot. I don't like it." "Nor do I, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "But the truth, it hides in those shadows, and I, Hercule Poirot, will bring it into the light." Chapter 6. A Lover's Quarrel. The Hotel Ritz, its marble facade gleaming under the Parisian sun, stood as a bastion of elegance amidst the city's autumnal bustle. Within its opulent halls, Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings navigated a corridor lined with crystal sconces and gilded mirrors, their footsteps muffled by plush carpeting. They had come to question Lord Reginald Ashford and his wife, Lady Evelyn, whose connection to Celeste Laurent promised to unravel another thread in the tangled web of her murder. Poirot's small frame, impeccably clad in a charcoal suit, moved with purpose, while Hastings, ever the loyal shadow, adjusted his tie with a nervous tug. "I say, Poirot," Hastings ventured, his voice low to avoid the ears of a passing bellboy. "This Lord Ashford business feels like delicate ground. If he was Celeste's lover, that's motive enough for a scandal. But murder? And Lady Evelyn, she's a cool customer, isn't she?" Poirot's green eyes glinted beneath his Homburg hat. "Mon cher Hastings, love, it is a flame that warms or destroys. Lord Ashford's affection for Madame Laurent may have stirred passions, his own or those of another. And Lady Evelyn, her composure, it is a mask. We must see what lies beneath." They reached the Ashford suite, a spacious chamber adorned with silk draperies and Louis XVI furniture. Lord Reginald, a silver-haired man in his 50s, stood by a window overlooking the Place Vendôme, his posture rigid with the bearing of an aristocrat. His evening suit, though immaculate, hung slightly loose, as if recent strain had taken its toll. Lady Evelyn sat on a velvet chaise, her blonde hair swept into a severe chignon, her blue eyes fixed on a novel she held but did not read. The air between the couple crackled with unspoken tension. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Lord Ashford said, turning from the window with a forced smile. "I trust you've come to shed light on this dreadful affair. Celeste's death is a tragedy for the arts, for Paris." Poirot offered a courteous nod, his gaze flicking between the couple. "Indeed, monsieur, it is a loss most profound, but I am here to uncover not only the tragedy, but the truth. You were close to Madame Laurent, were you not? Closer, perhaps, than a patron might be." Lord Ashford's face reddened, his hands clenching at his sides. "Celeste was a dear friend," he said, his voice tight. "I admired her talent, her spirit. Our relationship was one of mutual respect." Lady Evelyn's laugh, sharp and brittle, cut through the room. "Oh, Reginald, spare us the charade. Monsieur Poirot is no fool." She set her novel aside, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a steely calm. "My husband was infatuated with Celeste. Half of Paris knew it. But I assure you, monsieur, I had no part in her death. I was in the audience, watching her perform, not poisoning her in some box." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Madame, your candour is refreshing. But let us be precise. You knew of this infatuation. Did it trouble you?" Lady Evelyn's lips thinned. "Trouble me? Of course it did. I'm a woman, not a statue. But I am also practical. Divorce would have been simpler than murder, and far less messy. I told Reginald as much." Lord Ashford flinched, his eyes darting to his wife. "Evelyn, you needn't—" "Needn't what?" she snapped, her composure cracking. "Admit that I knew of your dalliance, that I endured the whispers, the pitying glances. I did not kill Celeste, Monsieur Poirot, but I won't pretend I mourn her." Poirot observed the exchange, his expression unreadable. "And you, Monsieur Ashford, where were you during the performance, before the scream from Box 5? "In my box," Ashford said quickly. "Box 7, across from Celeste's. I watched her aria, like everyone else. She was magnificent." "And after the aria?" Poirot pressed, his voice soft but unrelenting. "When she left the stage, did you see her go to Box 5? Ashford hesitated, his fingers brushing his cufflinks. I didn't notice. The lights were dim, the audience was enraptured. I assumed she'd gone to rest backstage." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Assumed, monsieur? Or did you know she would retire to Box 5? It was her habit, non, to watch the performance from there after her scenes." Ashford paled. "I suppose she did, yes. But I didn't see her there. I swear it." Hastings, standing by the door, whispered to Poirot. "He's nervous, Poirot. Could he have slipped into her box? A lover scorned, perhaps." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him, and turned to Lady Evelyn. "Madame, you were in the audience, as you say. Did you see anyone approach Box 5 during the performance?" "No one," she said firmly. "I was watching the stage, not skulking about like some assassin." "The usher was at his post. Ask him." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "Merci, Madame, Monsieur. You have been most helpful." As they left the suite, a telegram arrived for Inspector Beaumont, who had joined them in the hotel lobby. His face darkened as he read it. "Dr. Julian Voss, Celeste's physician. He's gone missing. His office is empty. His landlady says he left in a hurry last night." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Mon Dieu! The good doctor flees? This is most significant. He prescribed the tonic oui, but claimed it was harmless. If he fears exposure, Perhaps he knows more than he admitted. Hastings frowned. But the tonic was clean, Poirot. The laboratory confirmed it. Could Voss have poisoned the goblet instead? Possible, Poirot said, his voice low, but unlikely. The doctor, he is not a man of the theatre. He would not know the goblet's movements. No, his secret lies elsewhere. We must find him. They returned to the Palais Garnier, where the investigation continued amidst the hum of rehearsals. Poirot requested a meeting with the usher assigned to Box 5, a young man named André Dubois. No relation to Marguerite, he insisted, though his surname raised Poirot's suspicions. André, a lanky figure with a nervous tic, stood twisting his uniform cap as he spoke. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I swear no one entered Box 5 during the performance. Madame Laurent appeared there after her aria, but I didn't see her arrive. I was at the corridor entrance, watching the crowd. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And you saw nothing unusual? No one carrying a goblet, a tray, anything that might have been brought to her?" André shook his head. "Nothing, monsieur. The box was empty until she was found." Poirot dismissed him, his mind churning. "The box! It is a puzzle within a puzzle. Hastings. Celeste was poisoned, yet no one saw the poison delivered. The goblet, it was moved from the stage, but by whom?" They revisited Celeste's dressing room, where Poirot examined the vanity once more. The wilting roses, the metallic-scented vial, and the cryptic note from earlier investigations lingered in his mind. He turned his attention to a small silver tray, overlooked in previous searches, which held a single glass, its rim faintly discolored. He leaned closer, detecting the now familiar bitter almond scent. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to the glass. "Another vessel, and it carries the scent of cyanide. Could this be the true murder weapon, placed in the box to mislead us?" Beaumont, who had joined them, frowned. But the goblet was confirmed as the source. Could there be two poisoned vessels? "Unlikely," Poirot said, "but not impossible. The goblet was a prop, handled by many. This glass, it is personal, perhaps kept in the box for Celeste's use. We must test it." As Beaumont sent the glass to the laboratory, Poirot's thoughts turned to Lady Evelyn's icy demeanour. The wife, Hastings, she claims she did not mourn Celeste, yet she was in the audience, far from the box. But her anger, it is a motive. Could she have hired another to act for her? Hastings nodded. "It's possible. She's got the means, and that sort of cold calculation fits her." "Oui," Poirot said, "but we must also consider Voss. His disappearance, it suggests guilt or fear. We must locate him before he vanishes into the Parisian night." As they left the opera house, the city's lights began to twinkle, casting a golden glow over the Seine. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. A lover's betrayal, a wife's vengeance, a doctor's secret. "The heart of this mystery," he murmured, "it beats with passion and deceit. But I, Hercule Poirot, will find its rhythm." Chapter 7. The truth takes center stage. The Palais Garnier, its opulent grandeur now steeped in the grim atmosphere of an ongoing investigation, seemed to pulse with secrets, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings climbed a narrow staircase to the opera house's attic. Dust motes danced in the slanting light of a single skylight, and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten props. Inspector Claude Beaumont had received a tip from a stagehand that Dr. Julian Voss, the missing physician, had been seen slipping into the attic late the previous night, his demeanour frantic. Poirot, his polished shoes navigating the creaky floorboards with care, led the way, his green eyes sharp with anticipation. "I say, Poirot," Hastings whispered, his voice echoing faintly in the cavernous space. "This attic gives me the creeps. Why would Voss hide up here? It's like something out of a Gothic novel." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Mon cher Hastings, a man who flees, he seeks a place where shadows conceal him. The attic, it is a refuge for secrets, and Dr. Voss, I suspect, has secrets he fears to reveal. They found Voss crouched behind a pile of old scenery flats, his spectacles askew, his grey suit rumpled and stained with dust. His thin face was pale, his eyes wide with terror, as Beaumont's flashlight illuminated him. "Stay back!" Voss cried, his voice cracking. "I didn't do it, I swear!" Poirot stepped forward, his small frame radiating calm authority. "Monsieur le Docteur, there is no need for fear. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek only the truth. Why do you hide like a fugitive? What do you know of Madame Laurent's death?" Voss's shoulders slumped, his hands trembling as he removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he stammered. "Celeste, she was blackmailing me. Years ago, I treated Claire Duval, Etienne's sister. She died under my care. A misadventure, not malice, I swear. A wrong dosage, an error. But Celeste knew. She threatened to expose me, ruin my career, unless I paid her." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind piecing together the puzzle. "And so, you gave her the tonic, oui? The one you claimed was harmless?" "Yes," Voss said, his voice barely a whisper. "It was just a sedative, to calm her nerves. I gave it to her myself, 2 days before the performance, but I didn't poison it. Someone else must have tampered with it." Hastings, standing beside Beaumont, muttered, "That's a convenient story, Poirot. He's got motive and opportunity. Why run if he's innocent?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Monsieur Voss, where was this tonic kept? In her dressing room?" Voss nodded. "She kept it on her vanity. She took it daily, said it steadied her voice." "And who had access to this bottle?" Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but unrelenting. "Anyone, I suppose," Voss said, his voice trembling. "The dressing room was never locked. Stagehands, singers, even that manager, Moreau. He was always hovering around her." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Merci, monsieur. You have given us much to consider. Inspector, please ensure the doctor remains available. His story, it is incomplete, but it is a thread we must follow." As Beaumont escorted Voss downstairs, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The tonic, Hastings. It is the key. The laboratory found it clean, but Voss's fear suggests otherwise. Perhaps the poison was added later, or perhaps there was another bottle." They returned to Celeste's dressing room, where the familiar clutter of cosmetics, costumes, and wilting roses greeted them. Poirot's eyes fell on the vanity, where the tonic bottle had been found. He examined the spot where it had stood, noting a faint ring of residue on the polished wood. "Curious," he murmured. "This mark, it suggests another bottle, perhaps one replaced to mislead us." Hastings frowned. "You think someone swapped the tonic? But who? Marguerite? Duval? Patience, mon ami," Poirot said. "The truth, it is like a melody. It reveals itself in time." That afternoon, Poirot requested a gathering of the suspects in the Opera House's grand foyer, its marble columns and chandeliers lending a solemn backdrop to the confrontation. Etienne Duval, Marguerite Dubois, Lord and Lady Ashford, and Pierre Moreau stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of suspicion and unease. Inspector Beaumont flanked Poirot, his notebook ready, while Hastings hovered near the back, his eyes darting between the players. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we stand in the shadow of a crime most heinous. Madame Celeste Laurent was murdered, poisoned with cyanide, her voice silenced forever. But the truth, it cannot be silenced. I, Hercule Poirot, have pieced together the threads of this mystery, and now I shall reveal the killer." A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot's raised hand commanded silence. "Let us begin with the facts. The goblet, found in box 5, contained cyanide, enough to kill in seconds. Yet Madame Laurent was on stage during her aria, and no one saw her drink from it there. The tonic prescribed by Dr. Voss was clean, yet he fled. fearing exposure for a past mistake. Each of you had motive, each of you had opportunity, but only one had the heart to act. He turned to Duval, whose dark eyes burned with defiance. Monsieur Duval, you blamed Celeste for your sister Claire's death. You believed she betrayed her, stole her future. Your anger was fierce, your presence near the goblet noted, but your passion, it is in your music, not in murder. Duval's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his gaze remained wary. Poirot faced Marguerite next, her auburn hair catching the light as she stood rigid. Mademoiselle Dubois, your ambition was no secret. Celeste belittled you, kept you in the shadows. The roses you brought, the vial of perfume with its metallic scent, they raised questions, but you were on stage, visible to all, when the poison took effect. Your hands, they are clean for now. Marguerite's lips parted, but she said nothing, her eyes flickering with relief. To Lord Ashford, Poirot said, Monsieur, your affection for Celeste was a scandal, a wound to your marriage. You knew her habits, her retreat to Box 5, but your heart, it is weak, not cruel. You did not kill. Ashford exhaled, his face pale, while Lady Evelyn's expression remained icy. And you, madam, Poirot continued, your anger at Celeste was justified. Yet you were in the audience, far from the box. Your vengeance, it is cold, but it is not murder. Lady Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but she held her silence. Finally, Poirot turned to Pierre Moreau, the opera house manager, whose bald head glistened with sweat, his hands twisting nervously. Monsieur Moreau, you have been the shadow in this drama, always present, always overlooked. You loved Celeste, did you not? Not as a patron, nor a colleague, but as a man consumed by devotion. Moreau's face crumpled, his voice a whisper. I adored her. She was everything, the voice of the opera, the soul of this place. And yet, Poirot said, his voice rising, she spurned you. She mocked your affection, called you a fool. You, who knew her every move, her every habit. You had access to her dressing room, to her tonic. You knew she took it before each performance to calm her nerves. It was not the goblet that killed her, none. It was the tonic, laced with cyanide before the show. The goblet, it was a distraction, placed in the box to mislead us. Moreau staggered back, his hands raised. No, I would never. You would, and you did, Poirot said, his tone relentless. The residue on the vanity, the second bottle, it was your doing. You replaced the clean tonic with a poisoned one, knowing she would drink before retiring to Box 5. Your love, it turned to poison when she laughed at you. Moreau collapsed to his knees, sobbing. She said I was nothing, a servant, not a man. I couldn't bear it. I only meant to make her ill, to need me. I didn't know the dose was too strong. Beaumont stepped forward, his face grim. Pierre Moreau, you're under arrest for the murder of Celeste Laurent. As the gendarmes led Moreau away, the foyer fell silent, the weight of truth settling over the group. Poirot adjusted his tie, his expression somber. Love, it is the most dangerous of motives. It builds and it destroys. Hastings, shaken, said, I thought it was Duval, or even Marguerite. How did you know, Poirot? The little grey cells, Hastings, Poirot replied softly. They see what the heart conceals. Moreau's devotion, it was in every glance, every gesture. And the tonic, it was the only method that fit the timing. As the suspects dispersed, the opera house seemed to exhale, its grandeur restored, but its heart forever scarred. Poirot turned to the stage, where the strains of La Voix d'Ombre echoed faintly from a rehearsal. The curtain falls, mon ami, he said, but the melody of truth, it lingers. Chapter 8. The Final Bow. The grand foyer of the Palais Garnier, its marble columns gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers, seemed to reclaim its majesty as the investigation into Celeste Laurent's murder drew to a close. The air, once thick with suspicion and dread, now carried a quiet resolution, though the echoes of tragedy lingered in the hushed whispers of the staff and the sombre faces of the cast. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand staircase, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle. His green eyes, ever watchful, surveyed the scene with a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy, for while the truth had been unveiled, it came at the cost of a broken heart. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing beside him, clutched his notebook, his face still etched with astonishment. "I say, Poirot," he said, his voice low, "you've done it again. Moreau, of all people. I was certain it was Duval's grief or Marguerite's ambition driving this. How do you always see what we miss?" Poirot's moustache curved into a faint smile, though his eyes remained serious. "Mon ami, it is the method of Hercule Poirot, to observe, to listen, to let the little grey cells arrange the chaos into order. Monsieur Moreau's love, it was a silent force, unnoticed by all but me. His devotion, it turned to poison as surely as the cyanide he used." Inspector Claude Beaumont approached. His broad shoulders slumped with the fatigue of a case resolved, but not without cost. He extended a calloused hand to Poirot, his gruff voice softened by gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot, you've saved my reputation. The prefect was ready to have my head, but you've given us our man. Pierre Moreau's confession is being recorded now. He's broken, admits it all. The tonic, the cyanide, his obsession with Celeste. It's a grim business." Poirot shook his hand, his grip firm despite his delicate appearance. "Inspector, it is always a grim business when passion leads to destruction. But justice, it is served, and that is our consolation." Beaumont nodded, then hesitated. "One thing puzzles me, monsieur. The goblet in box 5. Why bother with it if the tonic was the murder weapon?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A clever misdirection, Inspector. Moreau knew the goblet would be found, would draw our attention. He placed it in the box after Celeste's collapse, perhaps carrying it there himself in the chaos of the scream. It was a prop, like those on the stage, meant to mislead us from the true method. The tonic, laced with cyanide, which she drank in her dressing room before retiring to the box." Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. "But Poirot, how did he get the cyanide? And why not just poison her outright? Why the theatrics?" Poirot adjusted his tie, a gesture of finality. "The cyanide, it is not difficult to obtain for a man with access to the opera house's supplies. Chemicals for cleaning, for stage effects. They are often stored carelessly. As for the theatrics, Hastings, it was not enough for Moreau to kill. He wished to punish, to make Celeste suffer as he had suffered her rejection. The goblet, it was his final act of drama, a symbol of her betrayal." They moved toward the opera house's entrance, where the Parisian evening unfolded in a tapestry of twinkling lights, and the distant hum of traffic along the boulevard Haussmann. The strains of La Voix d'Ombre drifted from a rehearsal hall, where Marguerite Dubois now sang as the star, her voice carrying a new confidence. Poirot paused, listening, his expression thoughtful. "She will be brilliant," he said softly, "but she will never be Celeste. The stage, it demands sacrifice, and Celeste paid the ultimate price." Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. "It's a grim thought, Poirot. All this beauty, this music, and yet it hides such darkness." "Oui," Poirot agreed, his voice low. "The human heart, it is the greatest stage of all, where love and hate perform their eternal dance. But come, mon ami, let us leave this place. The opera is finished, and life, it continues." They stepped into the night, the cool air sharp with the scent of autumn leaves. Poirot's small figure seemed to blend into the shadows, but his presence was as commanding as ever. As they walked toward the Seine, Hastings ventured one last question. "What now, Poirot? Another case? Another mystery?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his eyes reflecting the city's lights. "Always, Hastings. The world, it is full of puzzles, and I, Hercule Poirot, am never far from their solution. But for tonight, a glass of tisane and a moment of peace will suffice." And with that, the little Belgian detective vanished into the Parisian night, his mind already turning to the next enigma, the next curtain waiting to rise.